We'd like to thank everybody for taking a moment out of your busy schedules to join us. Glenn Loop here, Director of State Advocacy with Josh Ibersky, my Commander in Chief who handles federal and all things political in Washington. This is the second year that we have carried out a pre-session legislative advocacy update and planning session for what we anticipate in the 2024 legislative season to kind of provide an update on where we are organizationally and the like. So we've got an agenda that shouldn't take us too awfully far long to work through. Some matters that we do want to bring up, some warnings, some things that are positive, and we'll work it through state by state synopsis on where we are or think we are. But to kick things off, I wanted Josh to provide a federal update given the activity regarding the litigation, where we are with some select federal legislation, and then we'll turn it over to the state discussion. So Josh, why don't you kick us off?
Sounds good. Thanks, Glenn. I'll keep things brief on the federal front. I know that purpose of these calls is really states, but there are some important things going on in the regulatory sphere. We are awaiting our what's called an executive office meeting with the Office of Management and Budget and Regulatory Affairs about the characterizing flavor prohibition at the federal level. We've had a lot of good meetings with our coordinate associations, arguments against the flavor ban, similar to the ones that we use in the states, but also being very cognizant of pipe tobacco. We've asserted that the characterizing flavor ban should not apply to pipe tobacco, and that the FDA has a lot more homework to do because the data doesn't support prohibiting the sale of flavored cigars. We know in a lot of our membership, this represents anywhere from 5 to upwards of 15% of some of the market. So, we're actively fighting that. I'll be conducting one of those EO meetings. If they do release the flavor prohibition, and when they do, you can expect litigation from some of the counterpart organizations immediately. We will likely file what's called an amicus brief in support of that, opposing the flavor bill based off of retailer concerns, small business concerns, as well as some of the things that the FDA hasn't done. We filed a comment and have participated in all the stakeholder meetings. The tobacco products manufacturing practices, we recently filed a comment on that. This is mainly for manufacturers having to deal with certain sanitation, lighting, you name it, factory controls, hygiene, ventilation for foreign factories. We've listed an abundance of concerns, and what is the kind of trickiest piece of this proposed regulation, this of course would not apply to premium cigars. The current status of things is that the FDA does not have regulatory authority for premium cigars, but we know some factories produce flavored products for machine products in addition to a premium portfolio. So we're fighting this regulation, through and through. It's completely arbitrary, and there's no need to do it. The premise of this was to prevent wood, metals, feces from getting into tobacco products. Not that there's been consumer complaints filed to the FDA. This is kind of just an arbitrary thing that would cause a lot of regulatory hurdles for manufacturers, especially in the Caribbean basin that doesn't have the infrastructure or environmental standards. We're waging a lot of different arguments against this reg. But the biggest piece of things, the FDA recently filed their intention to appeal the decision that completely deregulated premium cigars by the Food and Drug Administration. we will know the substance, and in fact, if the FDA intends to actually appeal the decision on November 1st. So that's the filing deadline, where we'll get more information. I spoke with our attorneys last week about this, and we feel confident on the argument side. The judge's opinion at the circuit level, or the district court level rather, was very conclusive. It wasn't, they were wrong here, they were right here. It was matter of fact. This is what the FDA didn't do, and they need to go back to the drawing board. So, we have talked with our other counterpart organizations. We are pursuing, if they do in fact appeal, we will be fighting this tooth and nail with our lawyers, working alongside Cigar Rights of America. Those are the big ticket items regulatory wise. There's a possibility later in the year, there's a proposed rule on nicotine limits. Predominantly cigarettes are the concern of this, but it's a worry that we could get wrapped up into it, especially if the FDA were to be successful in re-regulated premium cigars. So we'll be challenging that. Some other initiatives that are still on our radar, but not necessarily as concerning as what I just mentioned. Every year, there's tobacco tax equity bills that are introduced that, double taxes, put it on the same playing field as cigarettes. With the House being controlled, and now we finally have a Speaker of the House, being controlled by conservatives, they're not going to get any traction in the House on this legislation. So we feel confident. We're not resting our laurels and not taking meetings on this, but we are going and actively saying and opposing these taxes. But it wasn't like during Build Back Better when the progressive wing had a trifecta, and it was seriously concerning for us. This is still an issue. We are Glenn and I, working together, are very proud of our record of not having a legislative tax increase at the state or federal level in the past 3 years. And that's something that we want to maintain. I think next year, Glenn has a tougher task than I do in that regard. But, we are actively monitoring it. We are also working on some legislation that's very retailer, small business specific. I was just in meetings in the Senate today about an organized retail crime bill. So if theft issues or smash and grab issues, we're working on some legislation there, some communications regulations, ensuring that you're able to communicate with your customers. There's actually a trade association out there that put together this protocol called SHAFT, which is prohibiting retailers from communicating with customers that voluntarily sign up. Some of the carriers that send the messages are actually preventing this communication. So we're working with the association to try to get a resolution. If we're not able to successfully come to a resolution as two associations, there's always the A, threat of litigation, but B, there is a regulatory process that we could undergo with the Federal Communications Commission. We're working on illicit market counterfeiting bills. We're working on credit card processing to reduce the fees for credit card transactions. We understand that if you, even retailers and manufacturers, if you can save a little bit of money, there's a bill out there that actually Dick Durbin is the lead sponsor, who's not necessarily a tobacco fan, but is a retail fan. So it's one of those examples of kind of unlikely bedfellows. We're not really working with that office too much, but we like the bill because it would amount to a cost savings for retailers and manufacturers in transaction fees. Cigar Caucus is going strong. We, obviously have kept our event series. There's about 30 or 40 members of Congress that are still smoking cigars in their offices. And a lot of these negotiations over the speaker So we're front and center, and even the anti groups that are out there are acknowledging. I watched a briefing that they did, all the cabal of anti-tobacco groups, about how this messaging of premium cigars has caught on. And, we're certainly on their radar. I think we're going to have no shortage of challenges next year, but we've built an infrastructure where we're really to meet those challenges. And I think that looking at where we are as an association, and I just got out of a meeting with Scott Pierce, and we had a meeting last week with our executive team and our board of directors. PCA is going to be in a position to fund government affairs operations to the fullest extent. This is the priority of the organization. This is what, all of you that come to the trade show and participate in the trade show and pay your dues, help fund. And we are back to normalizing operations. The states, and I'm not going to go too long on this, but we are going to have a grant program for our state associations for issues that pop up. That's something new for 2024, and that we're very excited about, to advance positive legislation. Glenn deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Before the litigation win over the FDA, we were talking at the trade show about monumental wins at the state level. 8 or 9 governors signing positive legislation this year. And that's a testament to Glenn's work ethic, from progressive states to conservative states, from cigar bar bills to tax decreases. Glenn has done a phenomenal job, and I'm looking forward to what we can do next year. And with that, I'll turn it over to my elder statesman colleague, Glenn Loop.
I turned 60 yesterday, and all of a sudden I'm the elder statesman.
You've always been the elder statesman.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm in Monday. See, the memory's already crashing. To kick things off, though, what happened in 23 was a testament to retailer leadership. I mean, 17 years of watching cigar politics. This year, the retail community really rose to the occasion and spearheaded things in state capitals across the country, with the tax cap bills that passed in Nevada, Idaho, Montana. Cigar bar bill is really driven by the retail community in Connecticut and North Dakota. I could go around the country, but it was like a perfect storm in terms of positive cigar legislation. What I want to do is start things off with an organizational or overview. We're lucky that in the Northeastern part of the United States, we've got a strong foundation of state associations that, again, in the absence of us putting boots on the ground and lobbyists in capitals, the state associations are the true building blocks of successful cigar politics. And we're just lucky that in the Northeastern part of the country, we've got a strong concentration of those. We've got, I'll go through the issues after I go through the states, but we've got strong state associations for Maine, New Hampshire, New Jersey / Gary, New York, and Pennsylvania, and Maryland, as we consider Maryland a part of our Northeastern coalition. We've got a reorganizational effort, sort of a revisiting of the association that does exist in Connecticut. We're going to try to throw a wider net, get more retailers involved. The cigar bar bill that successfully passed the Connecticut legislature and signed by the governor was a testament to the leadership of the retail community in the state of Connecticut. And it was, when it was passed on the Senate floor, it was noted that was passed in its form, which was pretty narrow. You have to have a population of at least 80,000 to get a permit. Is that it was viewed on the Senate floor as an experiment. Let's see how it's introduced. Let's see how it's implemented. Let's see the community receptiveness to it. Let's make it available and build upon it. So even though the bill was very narrow, it was important to the retailers, and rightfully so, to get something on the books to build upon it in the future. So we really appreciate the effort of the Connecticut Cigar Company in particular. Nick Casanelli has really did yeoman's work, hired his own lobbyist to work the Capitol on the ground. And it was a real case study for successful legislating. Dave Lafferty, I'm glad you're on the call because in the Department of, excuse me, hold on. Of where we need to work, I think you probably have some ties in Rhode Island. We need to get a state association together in Rhode Island. So if you've got any contacts there, just throw it our way. Because Rhode Island for the last couple of years, and I anticipated this coming year, has been fond of having introduced legislation on calling for greater local authority on tobacco regulation. Even though it's yet to pass, the very fact that it's introduced in a Northeastern state gives me pause, and I want us to pull together something in Rhode Island. We've got some strong building blocks for association development in Delaware. The retailers have come together there to help support legislation that would actually amount to an OTP tax reduction in Delaware. And we're going to have a rebuild effort in Massachusetts. And the wake-up call there was in September. Both Pennsylvania and Massachusetts spontaneously, bills that were filed back in February, all of a sudden in September received hearings. Just literally out of the blue. We have the tracking system, and it's like poof, there's going to be a hearing on a doubling of the tobacco tax in Massachusetts. And I was really pleased with how the retail community responded to that. We got a lot of calls. I received numerous personal letters and correspondence that between premium cigar retailers and state legislators. Back in August, we partnered with CAA on a legislative reception with the National Conference of State Legislatures. There was a strong Massachusetts contingent at that event, and so we were able to capitalize on that and literally reach out with direct calls to members of the Senate and House in Massachusetts in opposition to that tax increase. That bill is still alive. And we're going to do a reorganizational effort of a Massachusetts association here over the next 30 days. So that, and aside from Vermont, that covers our Northeastern footprint as far as who's got strong associations and where we're going to be working to strengthen or form them. Want to do a quick overview of issues that are anticipated in 2024. Proverbial flavor bans, whereas the feds have so far failed to do so. But as Josh mentioned, the rule has now been conveyed from the FDA to White House Office of Management and Budget. The states have not been bashful about introducing these at all. And in the Northeastern, there's a lot of track record in this regard. We fully anticipate flavor ban legislation being reintroduced in Maine. Maine is the one place it always seems to get close, but when it ends up in the Appropriations Committee, they can't come up with how to fill a $27 million gap if they did ban flavored tobacco products. And we have to watch how broad, because we're not just talking about mass market consumer products, it could reach into premium. And given how broadly some of these bills are structured, it could get into things like the terms characterizing flavor and flavored descriptors to characterize as a flavored product, to designate as a flavored product. So we have to be very careful about how broad those bills are drafted. Similar legislation has been introduced in Rhode Island and New York. It failed to get traction in New York, which is probably second to Maine as far as places of concern in that regard. The governor was certainly behind it in New York and also introduced in Rhode Island, but also did not get any traction. But the very fact that these bills are introduced give us pause and the reason we're involved in those specific issues. On the tax front, I anticipate tax increases again being introduced in Maine. The carryover bill I mentioned in Massachusetts. I'm not going to be shocked at all if the governor makes another run in New York. And we'll talk about the positive bills in just a second with each of these states and specifically New York in that regard. As I mentioned earlier, I remain concerned about local authority legislation being introduced in Rhode Island. It's the one place in the Northeast that has had that bill consistently introduced. Gary and I spoke earlier today about New Jersey. Gary, we'll get your commentary in a few seconds, but we also discussed the effort to ban smoking in casinos. It's really a cigarette bill, and there's not a lot of premium cigar, angle on that. You should be able to smoke cigars, obviously, in a casino, but the labor unions and the legislature just can't seem to get over that financial hump in terms of what has been a pretty serious effort between the labor unions and the support of the governor's office to ban smoking in New Jersey casinos. And I'll circle back to the cap in just a second, Gary. As I mentioned, the positive bill in Connecticut on cigar bars, but they also had a flavor ban introduced. We'll have to keep an eye out on. And the expansion of the Pennsylvania smoking ban. This would remove all exemptions. And this was another one that was filed earlier. It's been filed for several years, but this year seemingly got more traction because of the chest pumping of the sponsor of the legislation. They got a hearing, and we quickly drafted testimony for both the Pennsylvania Association with Greg Zimmerman and PCA. CAA provided testimony at the hearing. It's completely intentional to throw this vast net and close all exemptions, including cigar bars. Obviously, Pennsylvania is home to some of the greatest cigar bars in the country with what Rocky's done and with Burn in Pittsburgh and Ciaz in Hamburg and The Leaf at Famous and Ashton Cigar Bar in Philadelphia. You go on and on. It's just it's just a centralized, obviously, part of the industry with both distribution, manufacturing facilities, premium cigar shops, and obviously the bars are hallmarks of the Pennsylvania economy, as well as obviously being a strong part of the agricultural element of the industry with Pennsylvania broadleaf. We included all that in our respective testimony. We would anticipate if the bill advances, even though it was clearly intended for casinos, that we would work on exemptions in that regard. And again, keep an eye out on that Massachusetts tax bill. Before I ask for some comments from Gary and Sean, the thing to really look out for in terms of our legislative fears is getting caught up in legislation that's clearly meant for vape and e-cigarettes. The opposition crowd is obviously throwing a much wider net in this fear of all things nicotine. And we have to be very careful not to get swept up in legislation that's obviously intended to attack vape and e-cigarettes, but are written so generally that anything involving nicotine is in the crosshairs. So that's what we keep an eye out on. We get close to what, Josh? We close to 7,000 to 10,000 bills that we had to review and narrow down in 2023, literally 7,000 to 10,000 pieces of legislation that involve the word nicotine or smoke or cigar or cigarette. And we have to figure out which ones are relevant to us. And it narrowed it down to about 250. Of the 250, I think we went public with about 50 of those with active petitions to the legislature, outreach, testimony, positive and negative bills out of the 7,000 to 10,000 that came across our desk in the last 12 months. With that, before I get into the advocacy side of things, in terms of tools that we're going to use in 2024, Gary, why don't you give an update on new efforts for a tax cap in New Jersey?
So we're working on a tax cap and have been for years, but it's starting to resurface again. There's a couple of things that are going on that as we develop this, I'll have more information later on. We're excited about it, but we're very cautious. And part of the plug, in New Jersey, with a 30% OTP, we invite people to go to Pennsylvania and Connecticut and so on. So part of what we're fighting for is New Jersey needs money. And we proved in our paper, it's 7 or 8 years ago, that the state will make more money by having a 50-cent cap than by keeping the 30% OTP. And we have certain senators and assembly people that are listening to us. And as this one thing develops, this will become a very positive effort for us to really go after this 50-cent cap again. So we're excited about it, but we're very cautious. One of the things, in our hip pocket now is in New Jersey, it's okay to smoke pot. So that's okay, but God forbid we pay a fair price for cigars or pipe tobacco. So that's a new thing in our hip pocket. And I wanted to tell you too, with our organization, and we've been around 17, 18 years now, what we found is there's 3 of us that do most of the fighting. There's about 28 stores that are in our group. And as we all do when we start out in a group, you speak from your heart. Well, you know what? They don't want to hear anything from your heart. We learned it all comes from up here. So we're very professional. We're very direct. And that gets us ahead on the whole thing. And that's something with groups that are going to come on board. Have a leadership team, and where we need somebody from a specific area because we don't know that legislator, we bring them along to make the introduction. Then we take over the meeting because we know the new guy making the introduction is going to pour out his heart, and they've heard that all before. So it's all direct and between their eyes when we talk, but we do it extremely professional. So again, we have certain senators and assembly people, and if we go, we just did something for Senator Panaccio, and of course, we wrote out a check to thank him for having us, and he's one of our big supporters. So that's all part of the game.
Thanks.
All right. So, and I talked to Andy Kay before we came on, and he's watching the smoking bills on the casinos. And there's nothing exciting yet about it, but we will keep a close look on that. And again, do we want to have the state invite people to go up to Connecticut or Pennsylvania to spend their money on gambling because they can also light up a cigar there? Or do we want them to stay in New Jersey and help the state do better? So we're tuned into it.
Thank you. Would New York like to give their update now or wait till we're offline?
Yeah, no, I can do it now, Glenn. So yeah, I mean, Kathy obviously on the PCA board and is treasurer of the New York Tobacconist Association as well. So they are really starting to ramp up their efforts this year for the 50-cent tax cap and the liquor bill, which would give lounges liquor licenses. I know they got generally close on both of them last year, but now they're working with 2 lobbyist groups to get them pushed through. But really, the one thing Kathy wanted me to mention on here, she made this great packet, and it's addressed to members of the New York Senate, Assembly, and Finance committees, and it's about 8 pages. It's got like a brief, breakdown on why we need a tax cap that harps on small business. It price compares New York versus online retailers. It gives examples. One of the better things about the packet, I think, is that it's got this graphic that just shows the surrounding states' taxes. So you see New York 75%, and then you see Pennsylvania no tax, Connecticut 50 cent, Rhode Island 50 cents. So it really puts into perspective, almost like Gary was saying, like how much you're losing the states around you, and online, obviously. But yeah, it goes on to define why premium cigars should be taxed differently, and also shows proof of why it works in different states. So I think Wisconsin's the one they have the graph of on here where they show they made more revenue in a couple of years with their tax cap. It's got the and also, Gary, speaking on this, it's got a little graph with cigar tax, obviously 75% in New York, with cigarette tax being 44, vape 20, and cannabis 14%. So it really shows like these important bullet points that she could, essentially give an assemblyman or whomever this quick version to get their cap passed this year. And so she's made that available. If anyone wants to see that, I can send it to whomever, or you guys can contact Kathy.
Okay.
And she's also going to work on a packet for the liquor bill coming up here too. So this current packet is for the 50-cent tax cap, but looks like it could be very effective. But yeah, that's it. They're, like I said,
Not to
really.
interrupt, but the template is absolutely fantastic, and
Yes.
she has shared it with me.
Okay.
And we've already used it as a template for Georgia.
Great. Awesome.
So Gary, what we'll do is just to put it in your hands, because I want you to have all the tools you in your
Right.
hand. We'll take what New York has done and provide it to you, because the very fact that you've got a bill pending in New Jersey helps in New York politically.
Right.
The fact that it's pending in Jersey, surrounds the state. So, Gary, we'll revise the template in New York for you in New Jersey, and I really appreciate you letting us share the model literally all over the country. Anything else from New York?
I think that was all I had for you guys. Let me double check. Yeah, that was it. The packet, and yeah, I did mention they're working with 2 lobbyists this year, so hopefully they can get some traction on that.
What I want to do now is just to go through the bullet points of some things that we have to use to help support the effort. And before I get into that, I want to give kudos to Dave Garofalo in New Hampshire. They successfully warded off the elimination of the premium cigar tax exemption this year that was threatened again. And any bill that was introduced in 2023, you can almost bank on it being back in 24. And that's the reason I went through the issues that we anticipate, because it's like a broken record as far as the anti-legislation. And New York's the one place that's got positive legislation filed aside from New Jersey with the tax cap and the cigar bar bill. We put a lot of effort and stock into our grassroots outreach. We have cigaraction.org. We encourage all the retailers to put cigaraction.org from our website onto your respective sites. We will issue real-time alerts when bills are introduced, when hearings are being held, that you can circulate with your consumers.
I'm done.
You on specific testimony if it's necessary. But grassroots outreach, there are numerous ways to carry that out during the course of the legislative season. One, we encourage you to have a Capitol Hill Day, where you get your retail brethren together and have a designated day where you all meet and work the Capitol on specific legislation, or just to raise awareness as to your existence as a small business in your respective state. I know the New York crowd has done that very effectively in Albany. I know that Dave has gotten retailers together in New Hampshire. The main contingent has gone together against a flavored band of the Capitol. So I could go around the region and the country where that's been an effective instrument. We encourage you to have what we call cigar town halls, where you invite state legislators into your shops so that they can see your small business, that you're catering to a discerning adult clientele, that there's not children, you're not marketing to youth. See the price point on the products in your place. Let really a get to know you kind of session. And then with that, making sure every legislator knows who you are. It kills me when this happens. Years ago, before the tax cap in Nevada, there was a tax bill in Nevada. And I called a retailer and I said, your legislators are critical to this whole discussion. Who represents your shop? And they couldn't tell me. you should always be able to answer that one fundamental question. Who are the legislators that represent your shop? And frankly, your house, if it's not the same. And having that one-on-one working relationship with the legislators that represent you is absolutely critical. So Hill Days, cigar town halls, calls, emails, and using cigaraction.org are all the tools in our tool chest that we have to both for the retail community and your consumers to reach your legislators in the time of need, whether it's for good legislation to support or bad legislation that needs to meet with a quick, swift, and brutal death. So, Josh, with that, what did I leave out? Where are we as far as items still to cover?
I think we have it. We have our state association guide, that, folks that are starting association. I think everybody on here has an established association in their respective states. We'll be churning out resources, and if there's something that we're missing or you need, feel free to reach out. One of the things that our board of directors have said that, if we need some additional research capacity, to not be afraid to ask for it in 2024. So, we're good at rapid response. Glenn and myself and Ryan, if there's an article that comes out that is particularly concerning, we've weighed in on things and have done op-eds to counter some of the perceived or the prevailing misinformation that the anti-groups have put out. I think utilize the National Association as kind of the aggressive entity. We understand that you have to have relationships with your elected officials at the state level. You have to worry about your business at large, and sometimes there's disagreements. So leverage PCA to be, the aggressive. If someone's not, if they're really pushing something that you don't agree with and that would hurt your business and you don't want to be confrontational or aggressive, Glenn and I are happy to step in to play that role where you can maintain those relationships and continue to do that. We want to work with the states. We want to be a resource to all of you. And if we're missing something, let us know and we'll fill in the gaps. But I think that we're well positioned right now to have an impact, have a positive impact in 2024, despite some of the challenges that Glenn has talked about. The court case, the victories there, some of the things that happened in the state this past year, it's momentum that we need to leverage as we move forward.